Welcome to What Living Means. I'm your host, Vanessa Jasinski. Every year, more than 350,000 home fires occur across the country. The leading two causes of home fires are electrical problems and cooking-related incidents. With the holiday season quickly approaching, our home kitchens and electrical systems are busier than ever. Before your relatives and in-laws descend on your home, take a few minutes to double-check your fire safety equipment and prepare a family evacuation plan. In this episode, we're exploring the ins and outs of fire safety to keep your loved ones and property safe. Our special guest, Chicagoland firefighter Pat Schlueter, joins us to discuss some all too common fire hazards to avoid when cooking and decorating for the holidays. Patrick, can you tell us what are some basic house fire safety tips?
Make sure your smoke alarms are working. You should be checking them at least twice a year. They usually get replaced every 10 years. Having a fire escape plan is always a good idea. Coordinating with your family or your roommates, whoever you have with you, where to go in case of fire, who to call. If you have pets, children, make sure you take them into account. The other thing is just being attentive. A lot of fires start by people walking away, lighting a candle, not really paying attention to where it's at, not taking into account that their kids might be walking by, or if they're having guests over. That's probably some of the biggest concerns.
And how much time do you have to exit your house in a home fire?
So it really depends on the situation, but I can tell you for sure that you don't have nearly as much time as you think you do. What happens is a lot of people, a fire will start in their kitchen, cooking with grease, and it starts on fire. Everyone kind of wants to assume that they can put it out. They want to take some time, go get a bucket of water. In the amount of time it takes you to go do that, the fire ends up growing a little bit. And by the time that you believe that it's out of your control, it'd have been nice to have the fire department already on the way to help take care of that.
Yeah.
There isn't exactly a time limit on it, but in 2 minutes of a fire, all the synthetic materials that we see in our plastic utensils and the couches and the curtains, a fire in 2 minutes can grow extensively and get way out of control, get very dangerous. So as soon as there's a problem, they say drop everything and just leave your house, start telling everyone exit. It kind of comes with your fire safety exit plan. A lot of people run out the same door they always walk in, whether it's the garage door or their front door. But wherever is the nearest door that you can get everyone safely out, just tell everybody to go. Everyone's already got their cell phones on them. As you're leaving, dial up 911, or if you got to do it while you're out on the curb, as long as you're out of the house, that's really what matters.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people, like for us in our kitchen, we have a fire extinguisher under our sink that's pretty easily accessible if there is some sort of a grease fire. Is there a point where you're like, this is just too big for one of these fire extinguishers? Because I think my natural reaction would be, I'm going to grab that fire extinguisher and I'm just going to put this out if I know it's, contained on the stove. When do you know, when is it safe? Should I go for that or should I just get out? Because there's gas lines, all sorts of things that are probably even more problematic.
That's a very good point. And it's a very difficult thing to call on when it's too much, when you should stop those efforts. If you practice with your fire extinguisher that you've got under the sink, you see that the grease fire is going. Maybe you tried to put the lid on and it didn't work out. So you grab your fire extinguisher. While this is going on, I would recommend just call out to whoever's in the next room, like, hey, we've got a fire, call 911. If you got your fire extinguisher and you still think it's safe to do so, the important thing is to call early, because if the fire department shows up and you were able to get it with your fire extinguisher, they just go home. No harm done there.
And I think that's a great point too, because a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, I could probably get this out. I don't want to have the fire station come out, and people might think, is there a fee assessed to that too? Who knows?
Like we tell people, you're already paying for it. Call us out. It's what we're here for.
So should you bring anything with you? I'd probably bring my family, of course. But, it's really pretty much grab your family, grab your pets, get out as quickly as possible. there's no need to try to grab anything else. And I'm sure people probably worry about that. Like, I got to grab my purse, I got to get my phone.
Your life is the only thing that's not replaceable.
Yep,
Everything in your house, from your birth certificate to your favorite teddy bear that you know is on the corner of your bed, as sad as it could be to see it go, it's better than being stuck in that fire yourself. Let it go.
I agree. Absolutely. So how often should, you practice your home fire escape plan and smoke and test your smoke detectors? I know you said, what, twice a year test them?
Yeah, I'd recommend every 6 months. That's the general. They get fire alarms, like the smoke alarms, get replaced every 10 years. But if most people don't do it at all, so I'd recommend before the holidays this year, just go take a look at it. It takes you 5-10 minutes to Google the make and model to see, because some of them you could just see the green light from across the room. If it's green, you're good. If it's red, maybe go change it. Just know your smoke alarm. I'd recommend check it every 6 months at least. If you're on top of it, you're on top of it.
I know in a lot of our communities too, for rental residents, we have something called Gold Key Service. So our maintenance staff will go in and they check, when those Gold Key services happen, they actually do like a run through the house. They're looking at the furnace, the filters, the smoke detectors. At the same time, what would you say also about carbon monoxide detectors too? Because I think a lot of people don't even have them. And can you give any insight around that?
I would definitely recommend getting a CO detector. Read the directions on where they go. It's not something you think of, but especially around the holidays, it could be a concern. If you're cooking a turkey, you're using this oven for a prolonged period of time that most people don't use. So if there's any faults that are going to happen, if there's any leaks that end up happening, it's going to be around the holidays.
Yeah, it's crazy because I know we talk about fires and things like that, but in our house we always have our CO detectors and just make sure that they're always working because that's just that one invisible thing that you never know could actually cause some real damage just because it's not smoking or a fire, but it's just natural gas. So that is, I think that's really important too. And I'm glad you'd mentioned, and they're pretty reasonable and easy to install. I mean, I think ours just plugs right into an outlet.
Yeah, most of them, they just plug right into an outlet, they turn on by themselves. And again, I think they last like 10 years. So it's definitely worth the investment.
What would you say, Patrick, is the leading cause of home fires?
The number one cause of residential house fires is cooking related, and they usually start in the kitchen, obviously, with that. It's something we do day in, day out, cooking. We end up taking it for granted, which is why the fires start, but it's the one spot inside your house that you regularly have open flame and you're using appliances that get upwards of 300 to 500 degrees for prolonged periods of time. And we kind of forget that. People get complacent, they walk away to go watch TV, or they go out because they forgot their pizza was in the oven.
And I'm sure candles, the smelly candles that make your house smell really nice. I mean, I've been notorious. I've had candles, but I put the candle inside a candle holder with a hurricane around it. But there have been occasions where I'm like, well, totally forgot I left that candle going, and that's a scary thing. It freaks me out.
In the winter, when Christmas ends up coming around, the pine trees can be a big culprit too. All the sap that comes off of them and the lights.
Oh, my favorite time of the year. Christmas trees during the holiday season. What precautions? I have an artificial. I just like it just because it's easy. I don't have to worry about the dry needles going everywhere. But my parents, they're in love with getting their tree and then they put a little bit of water in the bottom of the tree. But literally by December 26th, it is so brittle that I get concerned for them. And they literally bought their tree maybe a week or 2 prior because 'cause they're sitting out, in a tree yard. What would you suggest for those people that love those trees that are real and making sure that they don't have any risks of catching on fire?
If you're someone who loves the real trees, if you insist on it, just keep the electronics away from it. I know it's nice to hook up lights and everything around it, but just introducing outlets down there, that's where you're gonna run into trouble. Having any ignition source near there is what you don't expect. That's the problem.
And I know a lot of with the colder temperatures too coming and winter months, fast approaching. I'm sure those space heaters and things cause a lot of damage as well. And I know, not everybody has great heating systems, so a lot of people use those. Is there some advice you can give us around space heaters and things of that sort?
Just look over the directions of what the safety precautions are. People will do that. They'll stick it into a corner of a room, or they'll kind of forget that it's there. They don't realize how hot it gets, and maybe they'll go throw a sweatshirt over it just as they're walking in the door. Make sure it's got plenty of room around it. Depending on the model, I mean, try not to have it running when no one's home. Because if something were to go wrong and it were to catch fire, no one's there to call it out, to call in. And the other thing is keep an eye out if there's recalls. There's been times where they try to recall heaters and appliances, and they just don't know that there could be a fault.
All right. So, what are some basic fire safety tips for holiday cooking? I mean, my gosh, you've got turkey on the stove, you got stuffing in the oven, you got 50 different things happening. What would you suggest to our listeners? What's some basic fire safety for cooking?
Number one thing, I mean, be attentive. Don't walk away, or if you do, have a timer. Go in, check on it. If you're going to be out, have somebody else come in, take a look, make sure everything's going well. Big culprit around Thanksgiving is people deep frying their turkeys and not being ready for it, not letting it thaw out all the way, or being way too fast when they're dipping it in the grease. That can be a big problem.
Yeah, we heard about the deep fried turkeys always kind of being a problem and people not knowing, the potential for fire with that grease. They're cooking them outside many times. Hopefully, they're not cooking them inside. But I've heard that it's if the turkey is not thawed out and it's still frozen in the middle and you put it into that deep fryer, it can actually create an explosion.
Yes, when you put a cold turkey into that hot grease, I don't even know what temperature people normally bring it up to, but this is multiple hundreds of degrees you're bringing a half frozen turkey into. It just starts bubbling like a volcano. And then what generally happens is the people lowering it end up getting burnt, dropping the whole thing in there in one go. And that's when it becomes a whole explosion. It gets down to the fire underneath, and it just kind of erupts from there.
So, traveling during the holidays is pretty common. So, what precautions should people take to ensure their homes are safe while they're away? Any safety things that you could suggest for people traveling or away from their home to make sure it's protected?
One of the big things is the space heaters we were talking about earlier. Some people think those can run all day, every day. Don't do that. If there's anything you're really not using, unplug it. Keep all your electrical sources out of the way. Another big thing is if you got any neighbors that you trust, which is ideal, like maybe have them come by while they're bringing in your mail. Just take a look around, check on everything. Make sure everything's closed up. If you have animals at home, they might stir up some trouble while you're away, so make sure they're taken care of, put in the right place, being watched over.
Before putting up holiday decorations to ensure fire safety, so, not inside the house, but on the exterior. I know there's so many lights, there's so many different gadgets now that are available for lighting and, it's like the Christmas story, the outside of these houses using how many megawatts of of electricity, but can you give any suggestions or advice on being safe even on the exterior of the house for the holidays?
On the exterior, one of the biggest things that comes to mind is not overloading the electrical outlets. People will run an extension cord from their front door outlet all the way out to the side where all the lights and decorations are, and they'll plug like 20 different things into one extension cord or one power strip, do more than it's actually built for. Not overloading it is a big deal. And then when you have cables running through, not having them all coiled up. Like if you have a 100-foot cable, but you only need about 20 feet of it, some people will coil them up all nice and together and tight, and then they'll just kind of stick it into a corner. That binding of it can create heat and start a fire itself.
Huh, I did not know that. That's an interesting point because it's, I think we end up doing that too because we have all of these deer and, the things that move their head and all the lights and, our extension cords are pretty long. So that's a really good point. And then would you suggest a certain outlet? I don't know all these technical terms, but my husband always talks about a GFI. I don't know if that's an outlet or something. Is there the right outlet to plug things into, not a right outlet?
So I would recommend if you look at an outlet, a lot of times they have a button, two buttons
Mhm.
right in the middle. It's like a safety fuse. So if the system gets overcharged, it'll just shut off. You have to go in and manually reset it. Highly recommend that because if there's a surge of electricity goes through, it could overpower and end up burning through the wires. And that GFI will trip and it'll just cut it off. So your lights might be off for a few hours, but at least your house won't be burning down.
Anything else? Any final thoughts that you would say, gosh, this is something that everyone should be aware of?
One thing that sticks into my mind is closing your doors, whether you're going to sleep or if you're going out for the day. If you got no reason to have that door open, like your bedroom door, just close it. There's been plenty of cases of house fires where from the kitchen going up, like the stairwells, the entire interior of the house is on fire. But the door to like the daughter's room was closed. And when the firefighters heard her banging on the door, they came up, they opened the door. On their side, the entire place is covered in fire and ash. The inside of that room was perfect, not even touched by fire. So closing doors if you can, when you can.
That's good to know. Yeah. Anything else that you can think of?
Don't get me wrong, I could go on for days talking about every little thing that we have going on. But
Yeah.
being attentive, looking over everything, keep your doors closed, and try to just use some common sense and teamwork in everything you do, and you'll be all right.
Thank you for listening to What Living Means. If you've enjoyed our show, take a minute to leave us a rating in your preferred podcast app. I'm Vanessa Jasinski, and I'll see you next time.